Sheet Metal Training Step 6.1 Labor Overview. For a labor overview, we're going to begin by going into the job file and into the takeoff screen, bringing up an item to use for our example, and then researching how the labor is actually set up for that individual item. Let's click on the job file button, and then with a zone already created, click the Edit Zone button. We'll have to verify the pressure files that we wish to have loaded in this takeoff screen. We'll use the 2-inch standard SMACNA low-pressure galvanized file for our rectangular, and click OK. The takeoff screen will then load, and we can then bring up an item and start talking about the labor for this individual part. I'm going to click on a 90-degree squared elbow, and we can see that the dimensions that came up was 24 by 12. This item does have turning vanes and it has 6-inch throats. If we look over at the labor table, we can see that the fabrication time is 0.755. and the install time is 0.823. To adjust this, all we have to do is click into the box and we can override what we want during the takeoff process. However, if we want to know how this labor is brought to this screen, we have to understand how the calculations are done for the labor. Go over to the left-hand side of the screen and we'll use vanes as our first example. By unchecking the vane, we'll see that the vane is removed from the picture, and we can also see, by looking at the fabrication labor and the real-time data, that the information is updated as soon as you uncheck it. You can see that the labor cost and the labor hours go down, so does the material cost. The program automatically removes all of the information for the turning vanes and the rail. Let's look at this labor a little bit more closely. Go ahead and click Accept to add this elbow into our takeoff. We can see that we've added in a 90-degree square elbow 24 by 12 in dimensions. We're going to go ahead and click on the job file button to return to the job file. Now we'll go to the Reports tab, and under the Detail Reports section, we'll select the Item Detail Report. When we click Run Report, it's going to generate a report which is going to break down all of the labor for this specific item. This Item Detail Report is one of the most important reports to use when setting up the labor in the program. The specific example that we're using is a 24 by 12 elbow with 6-inch throats, and it includes turning vanes. If we look at the information just below the big picture, we can see the fabrication labor and how it breaks down. Fab labor is 0.755, or just a little over 45 minutes of an hour. Right below that we have the item labor. We should know by now where this comes from. It is being pulled from the rectangular pressure file for this particular item. We have liner labor, vane, seam, joint, hanger, angle, seam sealer, and rod labor. All of the different components that can be added to this item. As we see, the only components that are being used are the vane, the seam, and the joint. We did not turn on liner. It is not large enough to include any rod or angle reinforcements. There's no hanger on this elbow, and the seam, which is Pittsburgh, is not getting sealed. We can see that the vane is 0.225 of an hour, so that's going to be a little under 15 minutes. If we were looking to adjust this item, the whole holistic labor for this item, down, we would have to first look at the components and verify them and decide what of those we wish to change. For our example, let's pretend that we wish to take this item down to a half hour. Total fabrication labor. Let's start with the vane labor. Can it be adjusted? We have 0.225 of an hour. Does that seem like it's long enough or not enough labor to adjust for this item? Let's look at where this labor is set up back in the data file. To do this, we're going to close the report, and then from our job file screen, we're going to click the Main Menu tab in the upper left. We're then going to go back to the Setup menu. Remember, in the 2-inch pressure file, on the turning vanes page, all that's set up in there is what turning vane to use. What of your available turning vane types that you have set up in your data file. No labor for the turning vane and no material cost for the turning vane is stored in the pressure file. The reason for this is you only have one location to go edit the information for that, and it will update all of the files. Go ahead and click the data file button on the left-hand side of the screen to open the data file. We're then going to take a look at the turning vanes setup specifically. Let's go ahead and click the turning vane button, and we can see that we've got all of our turning vanes listed here. We currently are set up from codes 1 through 7 and all of the information for these vanes across the top is listed. For our particular example, we were using 2-inch double wall, which is a code number 3, or line number 3 within this page. The rail cost is 41 cents a foot, and the vane cost is 40 cents a foot. We're more interested in the labor. The labor is set up for the base at 0.2. Well, what is base? Look to the lower right. Vane base labor is for a complete vane fabrication up to 36 inches of vane semi-perimeter. What that means is anything that equals 36 inches of height plus width is considered a base vane. So 24 by 12, 18 by 18, or anything smaller, 12 by 12, 6 by 10. Anything that's going to come up to 36 inches is going to take approximately the same amount of time to fabricate. So therefore the program will use a base labor factor for these items. Then with the plus 12 labor, we're going to add on additional labor for every 12 inches this item grows. So if it's 24 by 12, it'll use the base. If it's 24 by 14, it'll use the labor plus 12 of semi-perimeter. To make an adjustment, let's go ahead and modify this down to 0.1. We will then go ahead and hit the menu button, exit, and return to the main menu. We'll then go to the job file and edit our zone. Now the original item that we accepted is going to be still stored with the same labor. We would have to either A, do a general recalculation on this item, or B, select a new item. Let's select a new one. When we select a brand new elbow, we can see that the labor has been brought down from 0.755 to 0.655. Go ahead and hit the accept button and go over to the job file again. We will then go to the reports page and run our favorite report, the item detail report. Now that the report is open, this first page still shows that first item that we accepted. Let's go to the top and hit the arrow to go to the second page. On the second page, we'll see the information for this next item that we accepted. Our labor is getting closer to what we want, a half hour. So now we're at 0.655, and we can see that our vane labor has been adjusted down. If we believe that that is the lowest that we want to take the vane labor, then we would need to move on to the next component. We have seam labor, 0.05 of an hour. We're looking at a very small amount of time to run it through the Pittsburgh machine and actually assemble the item. We believe that is good. We're looking at the joint labor. What is the joint? Well, we go back up to the top and we look at the joint, and it's galvanized standing S&D drive. We have 0.06 of an hour, which is going to be the amount of time that it takes to turn the drives and cut the S&D drives to length. If we believe that is good, then we've verified that all of the components for this item are correct, and we no longer need to make any changes in that area. The only other adjustment that we could possibly make is to the item labor. We have a 0.42 factor. The 0.42 is to cut out the 4 individual pieces of metal on the plasma table, take them over to the brake, and form them, as well as beading and any other sort of processes that have to be done in your shop. Let's adjust this 0.42 down so that we can get this item to a complete fabrication of a half hour. To do this, we're going to close the report, go back to the main menu, go to the setup menu, and we're going to make sure that we have selected the 2-inch rectangular pressure file. And then we're going to hit the edit button down at the bottom so that we can open it and look at the labor for that specific elbow. Once the pressure file opens, we'll then go over to the item list and click on the elbow. Now our factor was 0.42 and our elbow was 24 by 12. 24 by 12 is greater than 1 to 1, so it'll use the 2 to 1 aspect ratio. 24 plus 12 is 36 inches, and here's our factor of 0.42. So we need to drop this number so that we can get it to a more reasonable factor so we can get our complete item fabrication down to a half hour. Let's go ahead and try a number first. I'll adjust it down to 0.3. To save, all we do is go to Menu and click the Exit button, and everything will be saved. Now that we're back to the Setup menu and we've made that change to the pressure file, we have to again return to the takeoff screen and bring up a new elbow to see the change. We'll go back to the main menu, the job file, and go to Edit Zone. Takeoff will reload, And again, these two elbows are frozen time with the labor factors that were used when they were calculated. We'll now go ahead and select a brand new elbow. When I pick on this elbow, we can see that the labor now is down to 0.535. This labor is getting closer to what we want. We still want to get it down just a little bit more to get it to a exact half hour. If you're unsure what this factor actually is, you can take the 0.53 and multiply it by 60 minutes in an hour, and it'll give you the exact number based on minutes. If you would like to see this labor represented more in a digital clock, go to the Tools drop-down menu at the top of the screen and come down and select the option that says Toggle Labor Display. This option here will switch it over so that it's now showing you what it looks like in exact minutes. 32 minutes is what we have. We need to shave 2 more minutes off from somewhere. Well, we've already verified that all of the components are as low as we wish to take them. The only other adjustment that can be made is to the item labor. Let's make one more adjustment. We'll go to the Accept button, go back to the job file, go to the menu, Setup menu, we'll select our rectangular pressure file and hit the Edit button down at the bottom again. Once the pressure file opens, we'll then click on the elbow. We can then go to that exact spot where we made our change and make one more change. Let's take it to 0.25. We can then go up and hit Menu, Exit, and it'll save the changes we made. This should be the change that did it for us. We will now go to Main Menu, Job File, and re-edit our zone. Our 3 elbows are still stored. We're going to bring up a 4th one, and this should be at the labor factor that we're looking for. We can see that now it's down to 29 minutes, just below a half hour, the exact number we were looking for. So through this process, you can see how we would go through and pre-qualify all of the labor for everything that is set up in the program. However, something to keep in mind. We've adjusted the turning vane labor. We didn't just adjust the turning vane labor for the 90-degree square elbows. We adjusted the turning vane labor for anything that is going to get turning vanes. So you no longer have to bring up a bullhead T and take a look at the vane labor for it. We now have adjusted the labor so that it's completely satisfied throughout the whole program. While going through this item, we looked at the Pittsburgh labor and determined that it was correct for this item. We do not have to bring up another item and look at the turning vane labor or the seam labor. So by going through and pre-qualifying all of your components, you can quickly update all of that information in the data file so that you don't have to verify it on a per item basis. Just use an item, turn on the component, verify the amount of time that you think that item should need, and by adjusting the labor for that component, you've adjusted it for the whole entire program. I would repeat this process with the elbow using liner, turning the 1-inch liner on and verifying how much time is added in for that liner. You can see here that when I change the item, it's adding almost a half hour of time in for the liner. I may want to go look at the liner labor. We'll save that for another video training. Now that we've adjusted the labor for that elbow, we need to make a determination on whether we're going to adjust the labor for the whole entire pressure file to the same degree. Let's go back to that rectangular pressure file. Job File, Main Menu at the top of the screen, and Setup menu. Once again, make sure that your pressure file is selected and hit the Edit button at the bottom. Go over to the item list and click on the elbow so that it comes up. Now we know that we've made a change to this elbow and we've dropped it down from 0.42 to a total of 0.25. We're happy and we're satisfied with this adjustment. What we would do at this time is determine if that factor would be correct for other sizes. Meaning, we subtracted a certain amount of labor from it. Would we subtract the same amount of labor from this size range? Would we subtract the same amount of labor from this size range? The easiest way to make an adjustment to your labor is using a global factor. So it is best to find out if all size ranges can come down with a common factor. You'll probably find that after you go through and verify the labor in the program, that there's going to be an adjustment that can be made based off of a percentage factor. Going through the changes that we just did, I would bring up different sizes, a large elbow and a small elbow. I would then pick another common item, such as a two-way transition, and look at the same information for it. However, with this one, if we look at the list of components, we're only going to have seams and joint connectors on it. When you get into the larger items, of course, you will have some reinforcements involved, but we want to find a common factor that's going to be an adjustment for this item. If we found a factor and we decided that the entire pressure file should come down by 25%, we could then go to the elbow and set it back to the factor that it was originally, which is 0.42. I'm then going to go to the menu button, click on the global factor button, and I'm going to adjust the fabrication labor for the whole pressure file down by 25% by putting in a -2.5. Going to use copy and paste so that I don't have to type it in every box. Standard length ductwork is going to be factored differently since I have a coil. I'm not going to use this 25% adjustment on it. We'll go ahead and click the factor button and say yes to the "Are you sure?" prompt. You'll then see that it's going to run through all of the individual items and drop them down by 25%. I will then be able to hit exit, go back into takeoff, and look at how my labor is coming out for that particular item. Now that I've saved the change into the pressure file, I could go back to main menu, job file, edit my zone, and any item I bring up should be within a really close factor of where it needs to be. You may have to do some fine-tuning on the smaller items such as end caps or angle tap-ins, where you want to use a more aggressive labor factor to drop it down lower, or maybe make it take longer. The purpose of this training video is to give you an overview of how the labor is actually put together in the program. Please do not just use this video to make any labor adjustments to your program. It is strongly recommended that you use one of our trained technicians and their questionnaire to go through and figure out what a very accurate labor adjustment would be for you. This concludes the walkthrough and the labor overview within the QuoteExpress system.